elaborate hologram. Is our universe the result of random activity or the result of intelligent design? If a creator was involved, can we discover him through our perception of divine order? This is Into the Multiverse with Josh Peck.
What is the reductionist worldview, and how does that fit in with Christianity, or should it at all? Well, we have an interesting and unique episode. We're doing something a little different on Into the Multiverse today, but it's because it does apply to our audience and really, I think, every Christian audience. With me in studio, of course, is Christina Peck. As always, my lovely, beautiful wife. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. And our special guest, Timothy Alberino. Tim, good to see you again.
Fantastic to be with you guys.
Yeah, I think as of now, you're our most regular guest.
Am I?
Yeah, we've had you on, 4 or 5 times now, and all episodes do really well.
Yep.
Our audience loves you, and of course, we love you, and we're glad to have you back in studio.
That's wonderful. Pleasure to be here.
All right. Well, this might be somebody's first time watching Into the Multiverse. If it is, where can they find us online?
You can find us here on YouTube at youtube.com/Into the Multiverse, or you can go to skywatchtv.com. There you will see many other interesting articles and other advertisements for our other shows here. But if you scroll down and on the right-hand side, you will see a banner of Josh and I. You click on it, it will bring you right here to our YouTube channel. Or if you have Roku, go ahead and check us out on Roku on the Skywatch TV channel.
Yes, absolutely. And if you do, we have some very exciting content that is just going to be for the YouTube audience. This isn't stuff that's going on Roku or anything like that coming up in the very near future. So make sure you check that out. Okay, so to just kind of jump right into this topic, usually when we talk, it's about giants or aliens or that kind of stuff. And when we were trying to figure out what we wanted to make the topic and focus of this show, you emailed me back with something I thought was something that all Christians are dealing with right now, even if they don't really realize it, because I don't think anyone's really put it into words. What is this reductionist way of thinking, and why is it kind of detrimental?
Well, there's an interesting phenomenon happening right now. Guys like us who put a lot of content out on the web have picked up on it. And that is that people are using the vast amount of information available to them on the World Wide Web to get dumber.
Yeah.
And it's very concerning to me. I call it a reductionist worldview. You take very complex issues and you reduce them down to their simplest form and call it truth, when in reality it's the other way around. We start off with a very simplistic perception of the universe, and as we learn more, we realize how complex things really are. You can take anything. I mean, if you talk about the macro scale or the micro scale, whether you're talking about the planets and the scope of the universe, or whether you're talking about the subatomic level, you're looking at a complexity that is almost unfathomable.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a reason for that. It's because God designed that complexity, and we can't even comprehend God's mind. He makes that very clear to us in the Bible. He doesn't think like us. So I think that Christians ought to trend towards complexity in their thinking and not be reductionists and basically go from viewing the universe as a complex integrated system, to viewing the universe in two-dimensional plane in a coloring book context. Basically, is what's happening. And what I mean by that is there's a tendency to, in order to truly understand something, to simplify it.
Right.
And that works with some concepts. And in fact, the Bible does that to a degree, but the Bible is a very interesting set of texts because, as Chuck Missler says, it's an integrated message. It is an integrated message, and it's multidimensional. And not only is it multidimensional, I think of it as a hologram.
Yeah.
Because in the Bible, you have a very simplistic revelation. The most simplistic revelation that a child can open up the Bible, read through the New Testament, even read from the Old Testament to the New Testament, and understand the plan of salvation that God has for the human race through His Son, Jesus. So the gospel is made plain to us. In fact, that was part of the one of the contentions, and it was a mockery that came from the aristocrats in Rome and even from the emperor himself, saying that Christianity is for simpletons, it's for slaves and children and women.
Right.
So the gospel it's foolishness to the Greeks. And yet, the greatest mystery ever given to the human race is the gospel. And, I'm not a Mason. I'm not an initiate of any of the mysteries, and I wouldn't do that. I'm not. But I am an initiate into the greatest mystery of all. The cross of Christ, the gospel of Jesus Christ, is the greatest knowledge that has ever been given to the human race. And those of us who believe in the gospel, again, you can be a child and receive the mystery of the gospel.
Absolutely.
And so the gospel is presented in the most simplistic terms, and yet there's so much depth behind the gospel and so much information that is encoded in the Bible. And I'm not necessarily talking about Torah codes, but there's layers of information in the Bible that are addressing one thing, but at the same time they're addressing three different things. That's why I call it a hologram. It's multidimensional. We're seeing one aspect. We're seeing where God is talking to, for example, God is addressing the Prince of Tyre, but at the same time he's talking to a different entity that is much older and that is much more powerful than any human prince. So the Bible is giving us presenting us with the gospel in the most simplistic terms so that a child could receive Christ, but yet at the same time is encoding layers of mystery, and it's a complexity that blows my mind. Just the Bible. Now think about the universe. Now think about creation itself. And so as believers, we ought to be desiring to grow in the knowledge, first of all, the knowledge of Christ, but also in the knowledge of the Maker himself. And to think like him. I mean, we're children of our Father. So to me, the natural progression for a believer should be from a simplistic worldview to increasing complexity.
I totally agree with you. And that's the joy of learning. That's what we get to do as Christians. We get to learn things. We don't have to stay stagnant, and we definitely shouldn't go the other way.
Right.
One small example that this actually just happened, and it does kind of come up quite often, which is the reason that I'll bring it up here, because I think, using examples, of course, there's going to be some specific examples we probably don't want to get into, but having some examples would probably help. Recently on my other YouTube channel, on youtube.com/JoshPeckDisclosure, I created a show called The Sharpening Report, which is hosted by James DeWitt and Jake Rahutsky here from Skywatch. And he interviewed Carl Gallups, great guy. We've interviewed him. We met him. He's awesome.
Wonderful.
And so he was talking, in the interview, he was talking about the infiltration of Freemasonry in the church and how that, can kind of happen sometimes. Now, when he's talking, because he's a normal human being, sometimes, he was leaning back in his chair, and sometimes he, goes like that when he talks, because he's human, and we do that sometimes.
We do that. Yep.
Or is it because he's Illuminati?
Well, and that's what people were saying in the comments. And people were... So it's like, okay, disregard everything that he's saying. Disregard his entire body of work, his whole career, everything that he's done to promote Jesus throughout his whole life. But because he does this, he's a secret Freemason. And so is that kind of an example of this reductionist way of thinking, where you take an extremely complex issue, like, say, Freemasons or Illuminati that do exist in the world, but reduce it down to, if you go like this, or if you do something like that, you're out.
You reduce it down to simplistic absolutes, black and white. First of all, I do this a lot when I talk. Not because I'm a Mason, but because I'm an Italian. And if anybody's gone to Italy, this is what you see when people talk to each other. Even in my own family. I mean, this is because I'm Italian, so everybody knows.
It's not a hand sign where it's like one size fits all.
That's right. But let me illustrate a point.
Sure.
The number 33.
Oh, yeah.
When you, in a reductionist view, 33, bad. Whenever you see the number 33, it's bad, it's evil. Well, who's the author of Numbers?
Exactly.
So the language of the gods is math, by the way. The most complex language that we know of is mathematics. And it is a universal language. It is a universal language by which humans can communicate with one another, even if they don't speak the same. Even if they don't speak the same language, we are still speaking the same mathematical language. You can't, in fact, we can't operate outside of the same mathematical limits and equations. They're universal. Whether you're a human being or an angel, you're dealing with the same physics. You're dealing with the same components and constituents of the universe and the same mathematical principles. So, and the Bible, by the way, is full of mathematical anomalies and all kinds of information coded in the Scripture as it pertains to physics and to math and all kinds of stuff. The number 33. The number 33 is not inherently evil.
Right.
In fact, the number 33 is, in some ways, intrinsically associated with Jesus.
Right.
Most scholars agree that he was crucified on the 3rd of April in 33 A.D. He died at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He was 33 years old.
Right.
He rose from the grave, from the dead, on the 3rd day. He began his ministry in Galilee, which is a region crossed by the 33rd parallel. He rode into Jerusalem and was hailed as king and the son of David, who ruled over Jerusalem for 33 years. And of course, Christ was 33 when he did that.
Wow.
It's amazing.
So, obviously, the number 33 in and of itself is not evil.
Right.
Is not some kind of a satanic sign. The universe, all of physics, all of mathematics, all of science was designed by God. He started it. And so there are much of what the occult calls sacred numbers and things of this nature are simply perversions of something that is true.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
what I was talking to you about. Whatever, God, I said the same thing to him. God created everything. He used everything. What man has done and what the enemy has done to try to perverse it.
That's exactly what happens.
Something completely different.
Yeah, so why would we want to not only allow but encourage the enemy to usurp these things of God? And we got to go to a commercial, but I want to bring up another example of that. Stick with us because we're going to talk with Tim more about this and why this is so important for every Christian nowadays, and why this line of thinking is so addictive. When we come back right after this.
Right now, when you purchase the new book by Carl Gallup's When the Lion Roars from the Skywatch TV store, you'll also receive the award-winning documentary movie Inhuman, featuring the internationally acclaimed Skywatch television research team. Inhuman travels the globe and speaks with world authorities on the subject of transhumanism and unveils for the first time how breakthrough advances in science are moving humanity to a near future dominated by a new species of unrecognizably superior humans. You'll also receive the over 5-hour full-length audio series, The Coming Technocalypse, featuring Skywatch TV's Josh Peck and radio legends Doug and Joe Hagman as they expose the role of future technologies in biblical prophecy. All 3 items sold separately hold a retail value of $60. Yours now for only $29.99 plus shipping and handling at skywatchtvstore.com.
Welcome back to Into the Multiverse. I, of course, am your host, Josh Peck. With me in studios, Tim Alberino and Christina Peck. If you haven't had a chance to do so, if you're watching this on YouTube right now, actually, we've made it really easy for you to subscribe. Just click on the little subscribe button in the lower corner of your screen, and then you'll have access to all past, present, and future episodes, and also some really cool stuff that we're going to be implementing in this next year. So you'll want to make sure that you do that. Okay, so to just jump right back into this, before the break, I was about to make an example, and this is controversial, but it shouldn't be. It's one of these things that people they interpret things differently, and ultimately, I think we have to allow people, individual Christians, to be accountable to God.
Yes.
We don't have to tell people how to live and all this stuff. But the Christmas tree, and the point that you made before the break, I think applies here too, because there are some that will say, well, it represents all these evil things. The evergreen tree represents all these evil things. Well, who originally created the evergreen tree? When I think about it, okay, the evergreen tree doesn't die in the winter, To me, that represents eternal life.
Yep,
I can't imagine that when God created it, he thought, I'm going to create this thing for Satan,
Yeah, why would he do that?
The fallen gods and resurrection and all that, they'll have that, but I'll create it for... I don't think he had that in mind at all. But the enemy has tried to usurp that meaning, and of course that applies in a lot of different areas, but I think that's one of them. But it's become this huge controversy that there are those out there who will say that if you celebrate Christmas or even say Merry Christmas, you're a pagan, you're not a Christian, you're not dedicated to Christ, you don't believe in the Bible. All these things.
I've had it said to me. I believe that the star on top of the tree is a representation of the three wise men following that star
Yeah.
to go see Jesus.
Yeah,
I believe that. I don't believe it's a pentagram and things like that.
That's how we interpret it, and we should be allowed to interpret things that aren't intrinsically evil, like you were saying about the number 33.
Yeah, I did a little radio broadcast on the question of whether it's okay for Christians to celebrate Christmas, and I thought I came to the very rational view with my associate who was on the show with me, that if, as a believer, you celebrate Christmas, you want to celebrate Christ, it's a tradition that you've held and you're familiar with, then by all means celebrate Christmas. If you do not want to celebrate Christmas, you feel convicted about it, or for some other reason, or for some reason you feel like it's pagan or what have you, then refrain.
Exactly.
And I think that would be the biblical view.
Yep.
And I thought it was a rational view, but I was surprised to discover how simplistic Christians are beginning to think. And when I say simplistic, I don't mean that in a good way.
Yeah.
I mean it's that reductionist mentality, that Christmas bad, this good, that bad.
And they don't look at the complexity of the issue, and it is a complex issue.
It's an extremely complex issue, and and people are beginning to attack the notion that God sees the heart above all other things, which is true.
Yeah.
He sees the intention of the heart, but the popular notion that's floating around the internet now is it doesn't matter what your heart is, you have to do things according to the Mosaic law and so forth, which is actually detrimental, I think, to a believer's process of maturing, and walking with God, and understanding how they should live in the time in which they live, in the culture in which they live. Plus, it also, by the way, and this is, I think, the real contention that I have, it renders believers, it incapacitates believers in society. It renders them useless in society and in culture. And people have to understand that society is given by God, that society is mandated by God, that government is mandated by God, that order in society, just as order in nature, is mandated by God.
Yes.
Not just, and it's not just Christian society or Hebrew society or Hebrew culture. It's human society.
Yes.
Right.
It's human culture is mandated by God, that men would have a system of laws and that would in which they would try and act equitably with other men, try and govern equitably. And so, as believers in Christ, living in the kind of a republic that we live in the United States, a democratic republic, we have the opportunity to influence society and to influence culture. And this reductionist attitude that's floating around out there, again, is nullifying the believer's effect in the realm in which they live.
That's right.
What's trending in a lot of Christian circles is the idea that we ought to be viewing everything through Hebrew eyes. That if you're not viewing this through Hebrew eyes, then you're not seeing the truth. Well, my saying is, I don't view things through Hebrew eyes. I view things through human eyes.
Yes.
I am a human being. And the gospel and salvation is not just for Hebrews, it's for humans. It is the restoration of what we were supposed to be. And that's why Christ is not called the second Moses or the second Abraham. He's called the second Adam.
That's right.
He restores the human species, the human race, to what it is supposed to be, what it was made to be, designed to be in the beginning, and we have fallen far. I mean, we are pathetic specimens of human beings, all of us. Genetically speaking, we are not gaining information in our genomes. We are losing information in our genomes, and we have a crutch of technology. If you were to take away the crutch of technology away from the human species today, we would be in a very, very bad condition.
Absolutely.
We would not be living very long, and we would not be able to deal with all of these ailments that plague us, such as cancer. And so the truth is that we're operating from a disadvantage. So the good news is that the gospel, that the part of what Jesus did and does and will do, is to restore those who are in him, will be restored to what Adam was meant to be, and even more so because now we have the second Adam.
Yeah.
So it's about the human species being restored to what we were called to be, the human race. And so that's the hope that we have, in spite of the fact that that we're poor specimens in terms of human beings. We will be restored.
Yeah.
In Christ, he restores all things, and that's part and parcel of the gospel. And so I view the world, I view everything through human eyes. Society and everything that goes on is the problem that we have, the condition that we find ourselves in is we are no longer able to interact with the Father and to comprehend the world in which we live like Adam was.
Right.
And his progeny. I think that our ability, our faculty for comprehension is so greatly reduced, is so greatly deteriorated from what it once was, that we have a hard time even comprehending things that I think Adam and his offspring took for granted. Being able to interact and being able to perceive the different realms, perhaps the different dimensions, the different faculties of the brain that they were able to harness and use, and even how robust they probably were in comparison to us and their physical strength. So they were much more than what we are today. When I say they, I mean the antediluvians, going back to all of our progenitor Adam and Eve. So we're operating from a disadvantage. We are operating from a disadvantage when we're dealing with reality. We can't hardly even comprehend anymore what's going on. And so bringing this back to that reductionist mentality, we're already at a disadvantage. So it's folly to further reduce knowledge to its most simplest and base forms.
Right.
Again, I think we ought to be progressing towards complexity of thought. I think when we as believers, we ought to have a degree of wisdom available to us that others do not. We should be able to perceive things more clearly and to comprehend things, even complex things. And I believe that there is grace to comprehend complexity.
I agree. And we see we live in a world where a lot of people, and this isn't just a Christian problem, it's a problem all over. I mean, even politically, we see that from the left and things like that, and some from the right too. But taking on this type of worldview, I don't think helps anything. It's completely the opposite of what was intended when God put all of this into motion. We're supposed to learn. We're supposed to think of things more complex than we used to.
Right, and not have this holier than thou attitude. And I know more than you because I have secret knowledge. Sound familiar? I have secret knowledge, and you are too stupid to understand what I see.
And that whole attitude. I think a lot of. And I actually don't even think it's a lot of Christians. I think it's a minority of Christians that are just louder than the others.
Yes.
I think that's
probably true.
I think that's what's going on. But they have forgotten love, compassion, and also that we're individuals. We learn things at different paces than others. I mean, the apostles were like that. John the Baptist got it right away. Thomas took a little longer, Can you imagine if the other apostles were around Thomas and browbeating him and giving him a hard
time? Saying that he's stupid, he doesn't know anything. No, they didn't do that at all.
It would have totally stagnated his entire ministry.
And I believe it does, it would have. And I believe it does that to other Christians around the people who have this mentality or this attitude towards other Christians. I believe it could hurt their walk. I believe it could even turn somebody off to Christianity. Oh, well, I can't do anything right. Christianity's too hard. Never mind, I'm not going to do it.
And it's not supposed to be hard. The burden's supposed to be light.
Well, the reductionist mentality also creates divisiveness among believers.
Yes.
Because rather than understanding the complexity between doctrines, different creeds, different points of view, people are beginning to box themselves into very elite circles in their minds and of thought.
Yeah.
I think this way, therefore you're not part of my group, and eventually it becomes, and we're not even sure that you believe in the Bible anymore, or that you're even saved or whatever. So the end game is divisiveness.
Yeah.
See, when you're moving towards complexity and you're maturing, that's a mature point of view. You begin to understand the different dynamics at work in people's lives and the different intricacies involved in doctrines, differences of doctrines.
Yeah, why people think the way they do, and how sometimes it's okay to have differences in opinions.
Yeah.
And that's the phenomenon that I mentioned in the beginning, that with so much information and connectivity available to us via the internet, instead of enriching each other with our different points of views, the very opposite is happening.
Yes.
People are coalescing around particular ideas, and they're becoming very vicious about
Yes,
it.
they are.
And and I think everybody who operates in the world of the internet is picking up on that very quickly. That instead of becoming more connected and enriching our points of view, the very opposite has been occurring, and it is a loss, in my opinion. It's a lost opportunity, and it's a reductionist view that does not lead to more information. It's actually losing information.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, you become a very cynical person, sitting in front of your computer screen with your worldview. Everybody else is wrong. Furthermore, not only are they wrong, they're Masonic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or they're in on it. Or they're part of the Illuminati or whatever.
They're a plant.
And you live in this incubated mindset. And now you only communicate with others who think exactly like you do, and you have deduced everything down to one singular conspiracy, whatever that conspiracy happens to be. That is a very unfortunate state that a lot of people are finding themselves in.
If people want to find out more about you, follow your work, where can they go?
I got a YouTube channel,
Okay.
Timothy Alberino. You can go to, we also have a YouTube channel for Gen 6 Productions. Basically, anything we do as Gen 6 Productions or anything I do, I put up on YouTube. So
Awesome. Awesome. Good deal. All right. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us once again to Into the Multiverse. Until next time, and as always, take care and God bless.